Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Our guest today is the Chief Revenue Officer at Envoy. Prior to Envoy, he was a VP of Global Sales and Customer Success at Dropbox. He also worked in leadership positions across sales, marketing, and finance department at top companies globally, such as Vodafone and Dell. His name is Philip Lacor. This episode is the first part of the conversation with Philip. We'll focus on how Philip started his career in tech, how he developed his career in multiple countries and different job functions. Welcome to the show, Philip.
Hey, Grace. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
I enjoy your New York office Zoom background.
Yeah, you gotta play with the Zoom backgrounds, right? So for the people who can't see me, I'm in a New York office, corner office in Zoom with a nice view.
Yeah, it's
in reality, I'm sitting at home, of course.
For sure. You started your career in Europe at GE in a technical position. Then you worked at Dell, Vodafone, and Dropbox in finance, marketing, sales, customer success, pretty much all business functions. That's quite a journey. I want to hear your story on how you started and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So I was actually born in the Netherlands, and how I got into tech is a bit of a long story. First of all, it started with my studies. Mm-hmm. I really had no clue what to study. Let's start there. I went from medicine to economics to technical studies and so on, and I wasn't sure. But at one point, what did dawn to me is that I liked more analyzing and solving problems than just sheer application of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that led me to look more at engineering studies. And so I ended up choosing chemical engineering. So I got a master's in chemical engineering. And after I graduated, I started working for GE. At the time, they still had a plastics business. So I worked actually in manufacturing and produced plastics. And I did that for a number of years. And after 4 years, I went to do my MBA in France and tried strategy consulting over summer. And then at the end, I started looking more at other jobs, and I ended up with Dell. And this is Dell was still very much in their heydays. And when I met them, I was talking to a VP finance who was actually American, and they had a great international team. And I was immediately impressed by the culture that they have there. At the time, they had, as I said, they were in their heydays. The pace of growth was like super fast. And what I loved was also the disruption that they were after. The disruption at that time in the industry was that they had this supply chain where they would do everything built to order. And as a result, they had like negative cash conversion. So customers would pay them up front, and then they would buy parts and build the PCs and servers and ship them. And also as a result of that model, they always had the latest components. And that totally disrupted the industry. And yeah, it was just fun to be in a company that was so disruptive. And I learned a lot, and I ended up staying 10 years. So, but then I got really hooked at tech because the pace of change is so high. And you can learn so much, and there's always new stuff. So I got addicted to tech.
Yeah. One thing super cool about you from our past conversation is you had quite a global experiences. You lived in 5 or 6 different countries. Can you tell us more about how your traveling journey started? Did your parents move a lot?
So my parents never moved. They are still in the Netherlands. In fact, they still live in the house where I grew up. But I always loved traveling, and I always felt there was so much to discover and so much to explore. And we ended up living now in I think indeed in my sixth country. I would say it was never planned that way. We have 3 kids. One is born in the Netherlands, one in Germany, one in Ireland. Also, that I wouldn't say it was like all well laid out path. But what I did do during my studies, I did do traineeship abroad, and I just got this feeling like, okay, there's just so much to explore in the world, and and then basically opportunities came, and every time you had the chance to say yes, you take it or you don't, and it's definitely not always easy.
I think living and working in different countries is such a cool lifestyle. When I was an international student, I was just studying abroad in one country. You change your career multiple times in different countries and doing it successfully. For example, before Envoy, you were working as a VP of Dropbox. What do you learn from working globally? Since each time you move, you had to start all over again. How do you make sure each time you move to a different country, you can have a good network there?
Yeah. When you change country or when you change industry, it definitely comes with challenges. I can mention a couple. At one point, so I moved to Germany, and there I had a big team. It was well over 1,000 people, and I had to 3 weeks after arriving, I had to host the annual sales kickoff. And there were about like 1,500 to 1,000 people there, and I had some German in school, but I was definitely I was definitely rusty, and so I had to do like a half an hour keynote presentation to the entire team
in German or in English.
I decided to do it in German, so it was cold turkey. And I have to say, it was like super stressful. I didn't sleep well on the nights beforehand, and it was like one of these very large auditoriums, and you're just aware that your language capabilities are far from sufficient. But I got through it. People complimented me that I had the guts to do it. I felt a little bit sorry for them because they had to listen for half an hour to someone who doesn't speak their language very well. But those things are then really, really tough, and they also like definitely cause stress. But once you get over humps like that, then you notice that you get into it. Yeah, and I think then there's when you're in a new country, there's things you don't know how stuff works. It's the unwritten rules that you don't know of. You don't have any network. You don't know what are the right partners, the right events you go to, and so on. So that you need to you need to be open for that and be willing to face that. And then I think the third part that is in general the most challenging. It's actually not the work part, but it's the family part. Because in a way it's easy for me, if you can call it easy. But once you go abroad and you start working, then you're busy, right? But the family needs to find new schools, build up new social life. So that is definitely also something that weighs into that. But as you say, once you get through these things, then you do learn a lot. And I think if I can say a few things on how it shaped me, it's that first of all on the business side, once you have the global experience, you start to really get an appreciation of how different regions work. And there are different elements to that. One element simply is like, okay, what is even the size of markets? So I have a pretty good view of like, what are the top 8 markets, what comes afterwards, and so on. And that influences like how you resource when you scale a company. Then there's things like, how do customers want to buy? Do they want to buy direct, online, through a channel? If you look at a country like Japan, they are heavily channel focused, and others are heavily direct focused. But then even like things like where do you need to put up your office within countries? There are different regions. So that's definitely on the business side where the global experience really helps. On the what I learned myself is that putting yourself out there, going out of your comfort zone, just makes you just very adaptive. And I believe situational leadership is important. We've also seen it in this working from home situation that everybody has to adjust. But in general, I think in leadership roles, you apply things that you've learned before. There are certain things that you can take from playbook. But then there's a whole lot that is very situational and where it's not like plug and play. And reading the situation and being able to adapt, I think that is very important.
For sure.
And the final thing I would say is that living in different countries gives you more appreciation for diversity. And diversity brings new ideas, brings creativity. In contrast to like monocultures where teams sometimes lack ideas. So I think that is also what living abroad brought me.
From my personal experiences and observations, one of the most difficult things about working in different countries is that a company that's reputable in one country could mean nothing in the other country. How do you establish a brand or reputation for yourself that's across multiple countries? If you go to a job interview, how do you make sure your work experiences and credibility is transferable? In terms of the skills itself, if I'm the top salesperson in China, may not mean I'll be the top salesperson in the US. The business culture and dynamics, super different. How do you make sure your employer sees your talent?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think with every job change or role change in a career, I think it's important that there's some overlap with what you have done before. And then there's some new stuff that you've never done before. If it's too much overlap, then you're probably not challenging yourself enough. You're not aiming high enough. If everything is new, then you might not be capable to do the role. And so I did feel that when I looked at my career and changes in country, is that when I spoke to like companies, things that are universal is like, okay, you need to hire a great team. You need to develop them. You need to build a great strategy. You need to drive daily execution. You have to be close to customers. So there's many elements that are actually transferable. Before, when I went in the past from big company to small company, people sometimes said, okay, it must be entirely different. But I still felt that 75%, 80% was the same. But then you need to learn indeed about the new region or the new product set. But there's usually quite often, I think there's a lot of commonalities and a lot of strength and experience that you can build on and that you can take into the new role. And that is important stuff to speak about when you look at these new opportunities.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of a time that you made a career switch from one country to another? How did you tell your story to demonstrate the skills that you had and position yourself for success?
Yeah. So the last company I worked in Germany was Vodafone. They are like Verizon, the telco. And as I said, there I had a very big team, multi-billion-dollar P&L. And when I went later on to the next company, which was Dropbox, my team literally went like 10x smaller and so on. And but what I could prove is like, okay, how do you scale up a team? Because I had definitely seen that growth, and it was key to also show that you mentioned an end-to-end P&L. So not only growth, but you looked at profitability. So you scale in a sensible way and so on. And so those things were very transferable. Other things that were transferable is I could talk about the enterprise customers that we worked with and how we dealt with that and channels that we built. And those were all things that were very relevant in later roles. And talking about these examples, and that is also what I look for when I interview people. Do people have like tangible examples that tell the story? The best predictor of the past of how someone's going to be is like, of the future is actually of the past.
Yeah. In your career, you've worked in so many different roles, finance, sales, engineering, marketing. What did you learn from each experiences? What are 3 skills you've learned from the past jobs you think contributes to your career success later on?
Yeah, I do believe that careers are like a backpack of learning experience. So every role that you do, you gain experience and you learn new things, and that goes into your backpack. And your backpack, if you keep filling your backpack, I believe you'll have a good career, and then opportunities will come to you. And so I think it's important to always take the opportunity where you can learn a lot, and also where you go out of your comfort zone. So indeed, as I said, I started as a production engineer in manufacturing, and one of the things I learned there was GE was at the time very much focused on creating a buy-in for transformations. They had this change acceleration process. So one of the things I learned there is like, okay, making a plan is one thing, but then how do you get buy-in for it, and how do you land it with people? And that's still something that I use today. When later on I worked in finance, so at Dell I started in financial planning and analysis, and I was like a sales controller. There, one of the things I put in my backpack is a deep understanding of how companies create value. What are the value drivers? How companies run their P&Ls, how they do multi-year forecasts, and so on and so forth. And this is one of the things that I still use like every day. For a CRO, it's very important to do that as well. And I can go on like that. So marketing, I was in, and sales I was in. So, and what it helps me to do is see like, okay, how should all these different disciplines work together? And when they work together, they will really have like a disproportional impact and drive growth in the company. And I think one thing that I'm always very focused on. My parents were both in education, and so learning was always very, very important. That's how I grew up. And so one of the things I'm very focused on is like having this growth mindset and being really curious. And I was thinking of like I'm having I'm using the Peloton right now, and every once you've done a sprint, they do what they call an active recovery. So you keep at a slightly lower pace, but you keep active. And I think there's a similarity with active mental recovery, where it's not only doing the work, but then also like really finding some time to reflect on what went well, what went wrong, how you can improve. And I try to be a sponge for like taking in new information, whether it's like blogs. I listened to your podcasts before, but also like looking how role models operate. So I worked with good role models in the past, and the leaders I worked for, I learned from a lot. And I think this growth mindset is extremely important to keep growing and to keep advancing in your career.
First of all, thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I love what you said about having growth mindset and being curious about different things. You switch from one department to another multiple times. How do you quickly learn the industry knowledge for different jobs? Nowadays, switching jobs is super difficult. If you haven't had the exact job experiences in the past, it's really hard to get a different job function in the first place. How do you manage to switch from one department to another? For example, from engineering to finance in a different company. Since there probably weren't any internet, how do you acquire the technical skills?
Yeah, it's a great question. I use like all means possible, but I'll talk about one of the more challenging transitions. So after like 2 roles in Dell where I was in finance, they asked me to take on a marketing director role. And I had done some marketing in my MBA, and I almost thought like, okay, this should be a smooth transition. And it was not. And it was not because I learned that I had some real gaps in my experience and my knowledge. So, for example, I had learned about general marketing and some product marketing, But all of a sudden, I had to lead a team with PR experts and communication experts. And I wasn't really equipped to lead that team very, very well. And as you say, you can learn in different ways. But in this case, I said, okay, I tried to read up, and it was not enough. So I decided to go back to school, and picked like the most senior courses I could find, and immerse myself over a number of weekends. In this case, about marketing communications, and that helped. That helped with really with credibility. So I think recognizing where you have gaps, and then trying to really focus on it. I think that's important. A more recent example is that you have the discipline of customer success in SaaS companies has come up over the last few years. It's really, really big. I have deliberately attended events with like Gainsight and others, and reading a lot of articles and books to really educate myself and be on the front foot, and then speaking to experts to really know what's going on in these disciplines, and trying to really get ahead of that. But it takes a conscious investment. But again, it's back to that growth mindset, and also recognizing where you have like real gaps. And other transitions were just easier. When I went to sales, I was just not hindered by too much knowledge. And you got to be, I think, the mindset that it's okay to not know everything. But I think with good listening and posing questions, you can also really do a lot. And when you see the fun part of it, that you're learning new things and you're focused on that really helps.
After you spending time in many different positions, what do you see as a common skills that you have to be really good at in different job functions? You work in so many different countries and positions. You sound like someone who loves adventures and challenges. Not everyone's willing to take a lot of risks to switch careers. Do you think changing job is the best approach to find out a person's strengths? If I'm already really good at sales, should I learn new skills, or should I stay focused, practice what I'm really good at? You're obviously very successful. What are some actions you took to figure out your strengths, and what did you do to maximize your strengths at work?
Yeah, so I think I don't think about it in terms of career risks when you make moves. I really think about it more as like opportunities for like next steps. So I think when you take the job that is more challenging, or where you feel you can learn more, that is going to accelerate your career. And when you say, okay, what are the things that I believe make me successful, or that I also look for when I hire people, I think that there's a number of things. We all already spoke about the growth mindset and that eagerness that to learn, that curiosity. So I think that's one. I think the other thing is I am also really motivated by having impact and creating something that has real results. So that is one thing. I'm going to come back on that. The next thing I'm also motivated by is like the working with people. So I believe that the combination of that EQ is as important as IQ. And a very basic motivation that I have is like, it's fun to build strong teams and to work with great teams, and then really put out a big goal, start running after it, and you celebrate milestones along the way. And a few years later, you look back with the team and you say, hey, that wasn't there before a few years ago. We created that together. And that motivation is very important. So, but that brings back indeed, next to learning and growth mindset, it brings that goal orientation, the being motivated by building things and having impact, but also by working in teams and building strong teams. And the final thing I would say is the following. I also think that simply resilience and tenacity are just very important. I think every founder of a company knows that on how important that is. But I once was working for a leader who said people used to say to him, hey, nice resume. And he would always say, yeah, it never felt easy. So there is this thing like I think every successful person had to really like overcome hurdles and deal with setbacks, and then still keep going and have like be able to motivate yourself to keep moving forward. And these are like traits that I think that I also look for in people.
I like what you said about EQ is as important as IQ, and the traits you mentioned, such as always learning, trying to create an impact. You mentioned about joining or building a great team. One of the most important things about team building is building trust. Can you tell us about when you switch to a new job or work in a different country or departments? How do you quickly build trust?
Yeah. So it doesn't happen overnight, but I think trust is very important. I think it's important to really get to know the people that you work with, and really spend time with them, understanding a little bit their backgrounds, and really making sure that you have a personal connection with them as well. Then the other thing is that definitely also in the beginning, I think that listening to people is important and really querying them. So I feel that if you come with like all the pre-baked answers, that is not helping build trust. Trust really also comes from really listening, and then giving people the chance to make decisions and to really do things. If you recently, I was working with the new team that I have right now, and it was a person who was working on a specific deal, and it was a very important deal to us. And this was an example where I could have stepped in and taken over the customer, but that would not have built trust. Building trust would be coaching the person and helping the person deal with that important customer. And in this case, it worked really well, and I'm happy about it. But I think these are in moments of truth when you really give your people the opportunity to operate and make decisions. I think that really builds trust. And so part of it, that is also allowing people to make mistakes. And I think good intention and hard work and so on account for a lot. And people do make mistakes, but how you respond to that as a leader will actually increase trust or lower trust.
Going back to career development, your first American company is Dropbox. As I remember, you transferred from Dropbox European department to work in the US. Tell us about what's the transition like for you. What's the first day experience like working in the US?
Yeah, so I was the VP sales for EMEA first. That's how I entered Dropbox. So we moved to Ireland, was living there and running that sales region. Later on, Dropbox then added Asia Pacific. So that was fun, overseeing the region over there. And then eventually I was offered to run the global sales and succession channel team. And initially, I was flying back and forth from Dublin to the US every other week because my kids were still in school. But then we moved over to the US, and again, it was a new situation where new team, a bigger scope. One of the things that also definitely played into that is time zones. So because people were literally sitting all around the world, and we had to organize our agendas on like being social, on having social times for people where they could do calls. But again, what was new was like I had like different peers, so building up relationships in headquarters with finance, HR, marketing. That became a bigger part of the role. So the peer network was very very important. It also gave me an opportunity to work very closely with engineering, product, and design because the products were mostly designed in the US, and that is one area where I also spend a lot of time and effort. So trying to take customer feedback in an organized way, and then working with the engineer. So so one shift from the shift from Europe to headquarters in the US, that the role really changed, where I was able to like touch more strategic things, and I had more impact on the direction of the company. Then the other thing that was clearly new is like figuring out the US market, figuring out what are the big segments, what are the big channel partners, what are the influencing networks, and so on. But I've enjoyed that really a lot. So
after you moved from the Europe to the US, how do you quickly build up your network in the US personally and professionally? What are some actions you took to blend into the current Silicon Valley ecosystem?
So the personal network goes a lot via schools, but the professional network there, I think so. I knew a number of people, but then actively speaking to them and asking them, okay, what are, for example, important events to attend? What are where are sitting certain aspects? So I started attending a number of like the bigger industry events. They usually have like also good networking opportunities. So that was one thing. Another thing is that speaking to partners. So when you talk to like, I spoke to a lot of like partners or connections from Dropbox, and they get you into further networks. I recently joined like a network for commercial like executives, But I think that the main thing is that you dedicate time and effort, and that you make it a conscious thing to go out there and meet with people and get to know people. And people have no clue who you are, right? So one of the hardest things is that they don't know your context. So you have to like almost like start all over again and explain like what your background is and who you are a little bit. And that just takes time.
All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. In the next episode, we'll focus on how Philip built up his network in multiple different countries, how he set up KPIs, how he identified customer and built up successful team as a chief revenue officer. Don't forget to come back on Wednesday for the second part of the conversation with Philip. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tip from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are at Grace Gong GG. Based on LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I love to connect with you and let me know your thought about the show. Now you can listen to Smart Venture Podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com, click the YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.